Hey Toy fans, I'm D21 Beast and welcome back to Project Geek Week. With me here this week we've got Greg and we've got JT.
Hey.
So we took a week off last week, but we're back this week to talk about a lot of the major news that's going on. And the first thing that I think we need to dive into is the Marvel Sony news that came out this week. If somehow you've missed it, Kevin Feige finally managed to land a deal with Sony that allows both Marvel Studios and Sony Studios to both use the Spider-Man character in their movies. What we've gotten from this so far is that there will be Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He will first appear in a Marvel movie before he then appears in a Sony-produced movie coming out in 2017. So that means that between now and 2017, we are going to see Spider-Man in a Marvel Cinematic movie.
Did they say just one?
So far, they're only promising one. My thinking is they've got a lot of time that they could do new post-credit sequence for Ant-Man or for Avengers. Next year we're getting Captain America and Doctor Strange, I believe.
Yep.
So he could appear in both of those. They've only promised him for one movie, and I think if we sit back and think about it, Civil War seems like the most likely movie that he would appear in. First, I guess, let me finish going through the notes here, and then we'll kind of talk about what this means. So Spidey will be in a Sony-produced movie in 2017. That'll be a movie that's completely funded by Sony creatively. Kevin Feige, kind of the brain trust, or really the big guy behind Marvel, is going to be leading the entire project, making sure more or less it's staying on course. Now, officially, he's just a producer, but the fact that he's involved at all probably means he's going to have, a hand in basically the direction of the film.
Oh, yeah.
From this point forward, Spidey can appear in any future Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. That's part of the deal that Marvel has, but of course Sony can still make individual Marvel or Spider-Man movies if they want to. And then we don't have any casting decision yet. There's been a couple of rumors out there. We can kind of talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
And then we've got, let's see here. Marvel will keep 100% of the profits for any movie that Spider-Man appears in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And with regard to Sony, Sony will keep 100% of the profit, and that's kind of how the deal is broken down. So Marvel didn't have to buy Marvel didn't have to buy Spider-Man back from Sony, and Sony didn't have to agree to share anything. Basically, they both have the understanding they can both use the character, and they can both earn 100% of the profit on the respective franchises.
So this really seems like it's just a big win for Marvel. How is this a win for Sony?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So Marvel has invested nothing. They
Yeah.
get the character that they always wanted,
Yep.
and we know they're going to use him the right way.
He's their poster child.
Exactly, right? So really, the worst that could happen from this is that Sony still blunders their way through Spider-Man movies.
See, I guess that's the thing I was building toward. Is this an indication of Sony admitting failure with Spider-Man, basically? Because I know that the Amazing Spider-Man movies haven't been as well received as, say, the first couple Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies were. I'm curious if they're hoping Marvel can kind of turn him into a really cool character and then they can run with it.
That really seems like what it is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It seems like Sony's basically, I really enjoyed Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man. Let me get that out of the way. I thought that was a really nice reboot, but they were so excited to get into a cinematic universe, a joint cinematic universe with Amazing Spider-Man 2. They introduced a lot of stuff. It didn't play well for all involved. It was like, let's introduce Felicia Harding. She's the Secretary of Green Goblin. Let's introduce this character. We got Electro coming in. We've got Vulture Rhino and Doc Ock and Oscorp and all this stuff. Yeah.
Maybe, I have a feeling that Sony seems like maybe they have their foot in the door with Marvel at this point, or maybe they might be able to say, hey, can we share this character later on down the line?
That would be interesting to see.
So maybe they're kind of like, if this partnership works out, maybe they get some other characters that
Are we going to see Fantastic Four now?
That's the thing, right? And this is let's kind of jump to that really quick. Fox is giving Fantastic Four another go, right?
Yep.
I have to assume that this movie just completely tanks for them, just isn't what they wanted it to be.
Yeah.
There is nothing. I know they want to cross over X-Men and Fantastic Four. I don't believe that's going to happen until Fantastic Four has a successful outing. Then Fox will take the chance of sullying their X-Men brand by bringing the Fantastic Four in. If that movie's terrible, it really seems like Fox would be like, hey, Marvel, why don't you go ahead and take your crack at these guys, and we'll just kind of work together on this.
And Fox has their hands kind of full with Deadpool coming out, with the Gambit movie coming out, with another X-Men movie coming out. So I don't think they're ready to cross over anything with X-Men to kind of like bleed some things into that. I think they're kind of keeping X-Men pure, and then
they don't want to ruin a good thing.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah. So it's really exciting news. Honestly, this is something that I think all fans have been really excited for. I'd say there's as much positive for this as there is negative.
Yeah.
I think positive is that yes, we get Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We get him Marvel hasn't said what movie he's going to be in. He's not going to be in Avengers unless he's like digitally
Too late,
added.
yeah.
He's not going to be in Ant-Man. I don't think the movie was structured around that. There was already a script that the Russo brothers wrote for Captain America: Civil War that had Spider-Man in it. In fact, that was the script that they were trying to make a deal with Sony with last October before discussions fell apart, and then we found out about all of this because of the Sony hack. So even though they had written a movie with Black Panther taking up the role of Spider-Man, there's still a script that they can shoot with today that has Spider-Man in the movie. So I really think that Spider-Man is going to be in that movie.
Agree, yeah.
Now
he plays such an integral part in the Civil War.
He does, right?
Yeah, and when you read that whole storyline in the comics, you're like, you follow Spider-Man because of his turn and his not turn. Like, so I think putting him in Civil War just makes the most sense.
Right.
Like, if they don't do it, you're like, how are you going to fit him in later on, especially with Infinity War and like all these other things that they have planned for the rest of the phases. Like, you have to put Spider-Man in Civil War to kind of introduce him there. So
exactly, right? And I would say we're probably going to get a decent amount of Spider-Man in Civil War, but I would be very, very surprised if we don't get, during a montage of fight sequences, and maybe even Avengers Age of Ultron, if they CG him in into like helping save the day at some point, or a post-credit sequence, the shawarma scene for Avengers, where they're eating the food. They went to the London premiere of Avengers, got everybody together, on the fly came up with this really funny idea. Tony said, let's go get shawarma, let's do that scene. In a week, they filmed that, and then they put it into the U.S. release of the movie. So they can do a post-credit sequence that fast.
Yeah.
I think that we could probably be looking at Spider-Man appearing maybe sooner than even Captain America: Civil War.
Yeah.
The problem there then is going to be, are we going to see who he is? Is it going to be like a CG Spider-Man who doesn't talk? Or is it going to be like...
That's kind of what I'm thinking, yeah. I mean, this is... First of all, Captain America: Civil War, I think, films in April, I think is when it starts. Mm-hmm. So they're going to have a guy picked out by that point. So they could do something really cool, and I don't know how they would ever keep the lid on this, but they could cast Spider-Man. Chadwick Boseman was cast as Black Panther for 3 months before it came out, which makes me think he's 100% in Avengers Age of Ultron because they cast him while that movie was still filming.
Yeah.
It would be really cool if they cast Spider-Man and somehow managed to keep it a secret, and then in a post-credit sequence, not only do we see somebody reach for a Spider-Man mask, but maybe we even see the actor who is Spider-Man. He puts the mask on, and that's kind of like your Marvel one-shot almost. They don't do those on the Blu-rays anymore, but you get like a nice, 3 or 4 minute sort of teaser of chaos is going down or the call to arms has been raised, and here's this kid who we don't see him get bitten by a spider, or maybe they could do that, and that's kind of how they introduce the spider bite idea. But something happens, a catalyst happens, and he's off and running. And now we're like, oh, wait, that was Spider-Man. When are we going to see him again?
Yeah.
And maybe we get a similar thing, with Ant-Man moving on until we get him in Civil War. One concern I have about him showing up in Civil War is a big moment, and spoilers for the comics here, guys. Big moment in Civil War was when Spider-Man pulls off his mask, and to the shock of all the press at this press conference, he says, my name's Peter Parker, and I've been Spider-Man since I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, whoa, in the Marvel the Marvel comic universe, roughly 10 years or so, however long they've decided has passed since he became a hero. People were shocked. They didn't know who this guy was.
Yeah.
And now they know he's the guy who's been in front of them the whole time.
Don't forget, Tony Stark made him do that.
He did make him do that. But I'm a little concerned about if they're going to do that in Civil War, how they're going to make it feel earned if we're getting his origin in that same movie.
Yeah.
Because then it's not going to be such a huge deal that, you spend Spider-Man for 5 minutes, he pulls his mask off. Well, he's just like Iron Man now. You know what I mean? Like, so it'd be really cool if they somehow, between now and Civil War, find a way to integrate him into this universe. So at least people have been talking about him, or at least there's weight to him.
Does Sony make another reboot of Spider-Man to kind of add to the continuity of the Marvel Universe Spider-Man? What do they do on the other end?
I mean, I think they're rebooting. They've said, and I don't have the quote here, they said they're taking him back to high school. But I do have an interesting quote from, let's see here, from executive producer Doug Belgrad of Sony Studios. His line is, this new level of collaboration is the perfect way to take Peter Parker's story into the future. We know that Andrew Garfield's not coming back. I mean, It hasn't been said, but it's basically known he's not coming back. So they're going to recast, and they're going to recast in the high school age. So we are definitely, I think, getting a reboot. What I hope we don't get is basically Spider-Bite, Uncle Ben dying, Green Goblin all over again. I mean, we've seen that in 2 movies so far.
With you saying the whole bit about it maybe being in a post-credit sequence where you kind of see the origins, it would be nice if the 2017 Spider-Man standalone movie isn't an origin story.
Exactly.
Yes.
'Cause
Yes.
We've seen that so many times.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing I enjoyed about the Spectacular Spider-Man animated series is they started that show off, and the premise was basically he's been Spider-Man all summer long between school years, and now people know, the common thug knows who he is, but now the villains are trying to go after him. The super villains are like, I can take this punk kid out, and then I'll be the big star. So it'd be cool if we get something like that, where we jump into it, we already know who he is, we don't need to see Uncle Ben die again, right?
Right.
So, and if you guys remember The Incredible Hulk, one of the things that was cool about that is it came out so close to the Ang Lee Hulk film that they spend the credits of the movie showing the experiment, showing Hulk busting out and injuring, not Liv Tyler. No, yeah, it was Liv Tyler, The Incredible Hulk. Yeah. I was thinking Jennifer Connelly for a second, but that was the Hulk movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, we basically see an abbreviated version, more or less, of what happened in the Hulk film. And when The Incredible Hulk came out, they hadn't officially decided that that movie was separate canon from the Ang Lee Hulk film. Now it is, but they were leaving the door open that the two could have been connected. So they just went through that origin really quickly, which we were all familiar with, and we're off and running with Hulk, and he's trying to cure himself, and that was kind of like the point of the movie. Yeah, I mean, let's not get another origin.
Right.
Let's get Spider-Man doing his thing and being caught off guard by the first major baddie he's had to take out.
Especially if they're doing a Peter Parker story.
Yeah.
We all know Peter Parker's story. I mean, they've done it twice. We've all read the comics. If they're doing another Peter Parker Spider-Man, then...
Yeah, just get with it.
Yeah, go with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for that matter, do we need Goblin again?
No, I've got to say that right now.
Yeah.
You know,
It would be really cool, but kind of out of left field if they did something like bring in Chameleon, Spider-Man's first villain.
You know,
and just had him be.
I would really like to see something like that, but I almost feel like he'd have to be, unless you're going to go like a Bourne style or some sort of like lower key superhero. I mean, I think Chameleon would be amazing for the Netflix series because he's a character that doesn't have a lot of flash to him, but can do a lot of damage in the right, story context.
Yeah.
The context is everything, because you can't just have. I mean, he's not a strong enough villain without the proper context.
Yeah.
Especially
Like,
for a movie.
I mean, when you think about summer blockbuster film, Spidey typically has these big knockdown slugfest with some big villain in like the middle of the city, and like buildings are getting damaged.
Yeah, that's not Chameleon.
You just don't get that with Chameleon. Yeah. So I mean, it would almost be cool. And again, part of this Spider-Man reboot that's a bit disappointing is that we're starting over, and he's going to have to earn his history with villains and earn his tenure as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
What would have been really, really cool is if they had stayed with Andrew Garfield. Let's say they introduced Chameleon. Now we've got a guy who is ruining his life, his professional life as Spider-Man, posing as Spider-Man, doing all these things, and he's got to deal with this like basically knockoff this entire movie that's making the police chase after him, making other people come after him.
Yeah.
I mean, Jonah would have a field day with a Chameleon type character, ruining Spider-Man's like professional hero life. At the same time, he's dealing with a much bigger threat, and things keep getting in the way because he's trying to take down this big guy.
They haven't really done in at least the Spider-Man movies I've seen, the more recent ones, what they did in the 90s animated series, the whole kind of feel of the city against Spider-Man. Like I don't know if it was a single plot line or if it was like running throughout the show, but basically Spider-Man was not liked by the city he was in.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of that is due to Jones.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, having them have Chameleon and being able to build that storyline into his universe would be nice to see.
It really would be. I mean, yes, I totally agree. Chameleon would be amazing. I'm very interested to see how they pull that off. I feel like they would have to have him be an underlying threat throughout the entire movie while something bigger was also going on.
Yeah.
That said, though, as far as characters we'd like to see, we don't know who's being cast as Spider-Man. I personally have my own prediction about it. I could be way off, but Zac Efron is somebody who's already in the Disney camp. He did the High School Musical films with them. He's an actor who's proving himself in dramas, and last year I think he was even in Neighbors, which was a huge hit.
Yep.
And we talked about this a couple weeks ago. He was in that awkward moment with Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm. Not Ben Grimm, Franklin, or Reed Richards.
Reed Richards, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
So he's acted with the caliber of these other actors.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, he's been with two people who are now in Marvel movies. I mean, not MCU, but...
Right. So, I mean, he's proving he can be more than a pretty face.
Yeah.
So, I personally, again, if they're going high school, Zac Efron's probably a little too old.
Yeah.
But I would, frankly, like to see him have his shot at playing Spider-Man. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts about actors you'd like to see.
I haven't given that any thought, actually. I wouldn't know who I would peg right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
you got somebody.
If we don't go with Peter Parker,
yes,
and we go Ultimate Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Donald Glover, man,
He would be amazing.
I know it's been all over Twitter.
I think everybody wants him. The problem
Yeah.
is like they go high school. How do you get Donald Glover?
That's true.
Yeah.
He's a young-looking guy. I think he could pull it off.
Yeah.
He could. I mean, I think Tobey Maguire was like in his 25 or 26 when he played high school Peter Parker. So I suppose, God knows, Tom Welling when he played teenage Clark Kent on Smallville was like 27, I think, when that show started.
Woo.
Yeah, I mean, it can be done.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see where the casting comes out. Obviously, we'll for sure know by Comic-Con. But if there's a really cool way they could reveal this, I think doing it in a post-credits thing during Avengers: Age of Ultron would be really cool if they could pull that off.
Yes.
So looking at some other things we have going on here. Oh yes, one kind of disappointment or one kind of concern I have about the new Spider-Man movies is Marvel has adjusted everything back now to make room for this new Spider-Man standalone movie. In 2017, Thor was supposed to come out, Thor Ragnarok. That movie's now been pushed back a year. Miss Marvel's been pushed back a year. Black Panther's been pushed back a year. Now, I think originally, Thor 3, Captain Marvel, and Black Panther were all supposed to happen before Avengers: Infinity War Part 1. Now Black Panther's coming out after Avengers: Infinity War Part 1. And originally Black Panther was supposed to be, what we believed, an integral part of Captain America: Civil War, so much so that Chadwick Boseman was revealed at last October's Marvel event when they announced their Phase 3 plans. And he was there standing between Robert Downey and Chris Evans. And it was kind of like a play on this whole sort of, I'm keeping these guys separated.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, they were playing up the whole angle that he was replacing Spider-Man in Civil War. If they're going with the Spider-Man script, and again, this is completely conjecture, who knows what they're doing, but let's assume for a moment they are, what does that mean for Black Panther's character? Is he still being introduced in Captain America: Civil War? Are they contractually obligated at this point?
I thought you said he was going to be in Avengers 2.
No, I'm sorry. What am I saying? Black Panther.
Yeah.
Okay. So Black Panther, I think, will be in Avengers: Age of Ultron. I don't think he's going to have a speaking role. If he does, it'll be very minimal.
He won't have a predominant role.
I mean,
It won't be a proper introduction.
Right. I think it's going to be because they're going to be in Wakanda in the movie.
Yeah.
They haven't said that officially, but they filmed in South Africa, and there's a shot in the trailer of Wakandan imagery, and even somebody who looks like they could be a member of the T'Challa clan.
Yeah.
So it seems likely that we're going to get an introduction to that. We got Claw in the trailer, who's Black Panther's nemesis.
Yeah.
So I think at some point during the movie, we're either going to see Black Panther in a non-speaking cameo, or we may even see T'Challa, which I really think we will. We'll see T'Challa, maybe not wearing the costume, but he'll be established as somebody in this world.
Yeah.
I think
Maybe they do something politically with Wakanda. Something more politically where you see him, and then the need for him to become Black Panther is like there.
Yeah.
And it pushes him into that role.
I mean, maybe Claw kills, and this is not a spoiler at all in the comics, it's Black Panther 101.
Yeah.
But maybe Claw kills T'Chaka during the events of Age of Ultron, and we see this young guy who is the prince, and he's like, oh no, my dad's gone, I really need to think about what this means for me. And then we kind of get him debuting full on either at the end of that movie. Again, maybe they had that planned in a post-credit sequence. Who knows?
Yeah.
But then we get him in Captain America: Civil War, kind of getting introduced to the themes of what's going on there. My concern is, I think we're still going to see him introduced in Avengers: Age of Ultron. It's too late in the process. I mean, it would just make sense as things were a week ago for that to have happened. But I think now, if Black Panther is in Captain America: Civil War, his role would almost certainly need to be diminished at this point.
Yeah.
Because if he was the center point, the counterpoint to Iron Man and Captain America, and now Spider-Man's filling that role, we don't really need two people per se in that role. But it depends on how they break up the teams. If they're going to have a team of Avengers versus a team of Avengers, I still think Black Panther would have remained neutral. Spider-Man, based on the comics, again, spoilers, guys, he starts with Tony's side and then switches to Cap's side, and that's kind of the turning point in the war when you realize, Cap's winning this one.
Yeah.
So I feel bad for that actor because it really seems like he might actually be sidelined now till post Avengers: Infinity War Part 1 with the solo outing. What does that mean for how well we're going to know this character? What does that mean for how that character may appear in Avengers: Infinity War Part 1? I'm really excited that Marvel's, basically Kevin Feige's put the brakes on everything and said, we're squeezing Spider-Man in here. But now I'm also wondering if it's going to be somewhat to the detriment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. And I didn't know if you guys had any thoughts on that.
I think that the average movie-going fan will not miss Black Panther and will probably be more excited that Spider-Man's there than they would be that Black Panther's going to be there. I don't know the story well enough to say. Like, I'm assuming in the original, like, Black Panther was put in here as a placeholder for Spider-Man in a way. Like, it kind of sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah.
So story-wise, it may make more sense to have Spider-Man there. And
well, and I think it will too.
Yeah.
I guess my concern is more for the actor playing Black Panther. I mean, they brought him out in a big dog and pony show last year and said, here's your new guy. You'll see him soon. And now it seems like we'll get him introduced kind of like Thanos has been lately. They introduced Thanos in Avengers, nothing till Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah. And then you get like 5 more minutes of him. And then the assumption has been this whole time, oh, Thanos is going to be in Avengers 3 when they finally get everything together and they go and attack. Yeah. And there's even suggestions now that maybe Thanos won't even be part of Avengers Infinity War. Maybe Infinity War will just be the fight for the gems and Thanos will be something down. I mean, we have no idea at this point, but it's just like they keep pushing him back. And, you know, it's great to leave somebody on the edge of their seat or do some universe building, but it really seemed like now is the time for Black Panther, I think. And we may just have to wait. And again, if he's post Avengers Infinity War Part 1, how then does he fit into everything? I mean, the Avengers and Infinity War Part 1 are already amassing together to take on a greater threat. I mean, I guess they could say things aren't good enough, and then Black Panther has a solo outing, and then he joins them for Part 2. I don't know. I liked the going fan belief or discussion had been that all these new characters, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, Black Panther, would all be introduced before Part 1 of Infinity War. They would have trouble. They would do well, but they would still have trouble against, you know, a major threat. Yeah. And then they would essentially be defeated until Part 2 when all the original Avengers come back, and it's like this big, you know, 12-man team of Avengers taking on cosmic threats and whatever. So it almost seems to me a bit detrimental that they may be putting Spider-Man in too haphazardly. Yeah. So
would they do the same though if they like maybe got just in my own fan world? What if they got Wolverine later on? You know, would they?
We talked about this.
Yeah. I mean,
there's a funny video out there. Hugh Jackman's doing press for the movie Chappie, Neil Blomkamp film that's on its way out, and somebody announced to him during his interview rounds that Sony and Marvel are working together, and Spider-Man's going to appear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he has this reaction of just like he's what now? Like he's completely shocked. Like you could tell the first thing that he's probably thinking is, how do I get Wolverine into these movies now? You know, like, and he's since let out like a pretty political response as far as people have been asking him, you know, Spider-Man's in the MCU now, how about Wolverine? Yeah. And he basically is like, that would be a really fun idea, guys, wouldn't it? And he's like, too bad there's some factors at play, and maybe it doesn't always work out, but I would really like to see that. You know, it's like he can't do anything about it.
So would all of his fans. Yeah. I mean, like, come on.
See, I completely agree, and we were talking about this the other day, and the X-Men are part of Civil War.
Sort of.
Yes. Sort of.
Yeah.
I don't know how big a role Wolverine has in it, but I would assume that if Wolverine, the character, were going to be in Civil War, it's past Hugh Jackman's time, basically. They wouldn't have Hugh Jackman as Wolverine.
Yeah. We're going to have to see where all that goes. I mean, Hugh Jackman, I think, is going to be in Apocalypse, and then I think at this point, X-Men 3, or Wolverine 3 is his last movie. Mm-hmm. And I don't have this in the show notes today, guys, but Patrick Stewart actually said this week, too, that he expects to be in Wolverine 3.
Really?
Yeah. So
I thought he was done.
I thought he was, well, in fact, a month ago, and AMC Movie News actually did a piece on this. They were speaking to, I think, Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart together, and they're both like, nope, we're done. We're not in X-Men Apocalypse. And then this week, Patrick Stewart said, well, yeah, I'm going to be in the third X-Men film, and I think we've got some good ideas going. And, of course, Ian McKellen's going to be back for Apocalypse, and everyone's like, what?
Whoa.
Yeah, you know.
Whoa, where'd that come from?
Yeah. So I guess we're nothing official there. Maybe Patrick Stewart spoke out of turn. Maybe they're discussing story ideas. Who knows? Yeah. I mean, if Ian McKellen's in Apocalypse, then we're still looking at time travel, which I think X-Men might need to move away from a little bit at this point. Yeah. Certainly hasn't gotten as bad as it has with Star Trek, but I like the idea of Xavier being in X-Men 3, but he also wasn't in Old Man Logan, and that's a whole other conversation for another time. But basically, Hugh Jackman, he's at the end of his run. So if they're going to...
It would surprise me if they had as big an announcement, like the Spider-Man announcement is huge. I think an X-Men announcement like that would probably firstly be bigger, which is hard to say because Spider-Man's so big. Yeah. But X-Men is just such a big franchise for Fox right now that letting the Marvel people use the X-Men characters in the MCU would just be... People's heads would explode. But secondly, if they did have an announcement like that, I would think it would only be a precursor to an announcement of dramatic changes in the X-Men universe.
Well,
casting, things
that's
like
true
that.
Because there's such a history. I mean, X-Men really is the first Marvel Cinematic Universe we've got. It didn't start that way, but the films have been around for so long that you can't just blend them and be like, yeah, so the Sentinels during Nixon's campaign, yeah, they were there, we just didn't mention them. And, there's a lot of things that happened in that movie universe that you can't ignore in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So maybe it is past Hugh Jackman's time. And honestly, during Civil War, the Superhuman Registration Act was very similar to the Mutant Registration Act that had happened in the comics before that. So the X-Men, for the most part, took a neutral stance. And Iron Man, because he's just kind of arrogant, there's actually a pretty cool issue of X-Men where he goes to the X-Men, talks to Cyclops, and he's like, so I'm thinking you guys can back me up on this because you guys are mutants, that a lot of you can be really dangerous. And Cyclops is basically like, look, we faced registration before. If you're forcing us to pick a side, you're not going to be happy with the outcome.
Yeah.
He's like, we're going to remain neutral, but if you bring us into this war, be ready to lose, basically.
Yeah.
So that would be cool just from a whole nother standpoint of like the final battle when like the cavalry comes in. But that's basically the Spider-Man news. It really seems like we're getting another Peter Parker Spider-Man for all intents and purposes. And whether you like it or dislike it, it's most likely going to go down that way. And it's just huge news that this is finally happening. I mean, this is something fans have wanted for a very long time. So lots of news is going to be coming out. We'll definitely want to stick with that. Comic-Con this year is probably going to be huge because of this.
Oh yeah, I'll have my eyes glued everywhere.
Before we go on to the next topic,
sure.
you mentioned Thor Ragnarok earlier.
Yes.
And this is a complete segue, but I've been playing Marvel Puzzle Quest, and tomorrow I get a Ragnarok card.
Yes.
Now, Ragnarok is like a Robo Thor clone. Like, what's the story?
So, here's what I know about a robot Thor clone. Again, spoilers for Civil War, guys. During Civil War, the comic book, Thor was dead because his comic book was low in sales, and around the time that Avengers Disassembled happened, instead of having Thor go his own way or whatever when the Avengers broke up, the writer of Thor at the time did the Ragnarok story and basically killed Thor and all of Asgard. And they were just gone during the time of Civil War. But during Civil War, Hank Pym and Mr. Fantastic and Iron Man had a lock of Thor's hair. And they're like, we really need a trump card because we're hurting against Captain America and his forces. So they, in an attempt to clone Thor, actually create an android clone hybrid of Thor. And this Thor ends up, first of all, shocking Cap's side. But then he goes berserk during the fight and they can't control him, and that becomes a whole thing. So that's the robot Thor that I know of. If there's another one in the comics, I'm not familiar with him. But that's where I think the Marvel Puzzle Quest version of robot Thor comes from.
So that was the one you're talking about, was that Ragnarok?
They didn't call him Ragnarok in the comic. So I don't know if he's been retroactively called Ragnarok because I
think Ragnarok was more of an event that happened.
Well, in Norse mythology, Ragnarok I think is like the end of the world.
So that's what I know. I mean, guys, if there's another Ragnarok Thor robot out there that I'm not familiar with, put it in the comments below. Let us know about it. But that's what I know about him. And I don't think he was ever even officially called Thor in the book, but it was understood that he was Thor. But honestly, that was, in the course of Civil War, that was almost a non-event. I mean, it was a big sort of shocking twist that they had this thing and that he went berserk on everyone. But as soon as that was taken care of, they don't really mention it for the rest of the book.
Well, Ragnarok Thor is actually the last, like the main villain, the final boss of Marvel Puzzle Quest.
Okay, well, you're right. The story mode, So, which is weird because that game's sort of set in the Dark Reign era. But anyway, but so I don't know if that's going to be one of the same. I don't think we're going to see Ragnarok in the movies, though. I think the idea behind the Ragnarok event movie, Thor 3, is to basically cap off Chris Hemsworth's time as Thor. In case they don't want to re-sign him to a new contract, they can pretend like Asgard's destroyed.
Well, it sounds like setting up to Ragnarok, the Robo-Thor clone.
Potentially. So one thing that they did with the comics is after Ragnarok happened, Thor was gone, all of that was gone, and then post-Civil War, they decided to bring Thor back. And then there was this whole thing about how Asgard was now in Oklahoma, and Thor came back, and all the gods came back, and they kind of relaunched the series there. So I think they're leaving themselves the opening to follow the comics. If they decide to kill Asgard, I mean, if you guys haven't seen Thor 2: The Dark World, this is kind of old news at this point, but Loki's on the throne of Asgard. So they've kind of set everything up to where they can finish off this Loki story while potentially destroying Asgard at the same time and wrapping all of that stuff up. And I think they're leaving themselves out. By calling it Ragnarok, it mirrors what they did in the comics. If they ever choose to re-sign Chris Hemsworth or get a new actor, they can bring Thor back and basically give him a human avatar, maybe that looks different or something. I don't know. They'll figure all that out as it comes down.
I
But
think it's too far down the line.
Yeah, so
and
I
they're
mean,
pushing it down even further now.
Ragnarok now, I think, is in between Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2, or I need to look at the dates again, but it's so close to that it'll just be interesting to see what they do at this point, because I'm sure that movie hasn't even been written yet.
Maybe they destroy Asgard and Thor gets so mad that he's like, I have to go after I have to go after Thanos like now.
So
we don't know.
We'll see what happens with that. But the next bit of news here